Hello and welcome back to the Marathon HSC podcast, the podcast dedicated to senior high school students undertaking the HSC. I'm your host, Sarah, and this is episode 9 of season 1, the English series on the common module, Texts and Human Experiences. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the second of the many Rosemary Dobson poems we'll be exploring together, specifically her poem, Over the Hill. We'll be looking into everything you'll need to craft your common module notes, from values to themes, context, characters, and so much more. But most importantly, keep your ears ready to catch the insightful gems I'll be sharing to help you with your common module, Rosemary Dobson essays. So, let's dive into this text. So let's work through a quick recap of the text, and I'll even conduct some analysis with you too. So Rosemary Dobson's poem, Over the Hill, was actually written in 1965, and it shows us this workman's journey home at the end of a long day. And so the poem uses vivid imagery to portray the labourer's physical presence and his interaction with the landscape around him. The poem is set at dusk, and as the workman dredges home with his bluntly forward boots, as the poem says, this is where we're getting the scene set by Dobson, and she's creating a strong visual image of the man's silhouette against the fading light, describing how he crests the hill and fills the sky. This portrayal lays an emphasis on the man's imposing physical presence and his connection to the natural world. Now, yes, there is a hill in the poem, and the hill in the poem actually serves as both a literal and metaphorical obstacle, where, as the workman climbs over it, he represents the daily challenges he faces, drudging his way up. And so the journey home becomes a symbol for life's struggles and the perseverance required to overcome them. Dobson also imbues the workman with a sense of quiet power and dignity. She writes that he could move mountains if he cared, and this suggests his potential strength. However, the poem also shows his humility and practicality, as he chooses not to exercise this power unnecessarily. Now, the poem also places emphasis on the workman's relationship with the natural world, as we've probably come to notice at this point, and how he interacts with the earth, wind, and stars in a familiar and almost casual manner. This connection to nature underscores the theme of the man's place within the larger universe. And so, in sum, Over the Hill presents a nuanced portrait of a working class figure and explores themes of labour, dignity, and the human relationship with nature. And through its vivid imagery and symbolism, the poem invites readers to consider the quiet strength and resilience of ordinary individuals who are facing life's daily challenges. Okay, time for some context. Let's look at what was happening at the period of 1965 when Rosemary Dobson sat down and wrote this poem. So the 1960s in Australia was a period of economic prosperity and social change following World War II. So many Australians were experiencing improved living standards and increased opportunities. So this post-war Australia may have been explored through the piece of the workman in Over the Hill. The poem depicts a rural man, as we just spoke about, and this highlights the continued importance of agricultural and manual labour in Australia's economy and culture. Now, this could be portrayed in the poem as a means to question and challenge the increased urbanisation and the shift away from rural lifestyles, in an attempt to say, hey, this is still an area that provides prosperity and wealth to people, and they live their lives calm and have a close relationship to nature, so this is something that we should still keep, contrary to what was actually happening at the time. Now, by focusing on a labourer returning home after a long day's work, Dobson draws attention to the experiences of working-class Australians, celebrating the dignity and quiet strength of normal, ordinary workers. Another point I want to note was that while the poem centres on a male worker, the 1960s actually saw the beginning of significant changes in gender roles and women's rights in Australia. So Dobson, as a female poet writing about a male subject, reflects on this dynamic shifting. And finally, as we discussed earlier, the vivid depiction of the Australian landscape in the poem and its focus on resilience and stoicism reflects ongoing explorations of Australian national identity in literature and culture during this period. Now, remember, Dobson was a part of a generation of Australian poets who were moving away from the earlier bush ballad traditions and towards more modernist styles, while still engaging with the uniquely Australian themes and settings. So this was a move away from the Henry Lawson style that had very much dominated the era beforehand. Now, if you want a little bit more info on Dobson's personal context, head to episode 8 where we explore her text Young Girl at a Window and take an introductory look at Dobson's life at the time and the influences this could have made on her poems. Okay, so traditional values. Now, my job here is to try and shape your perspective as best as I can for each of your texts. And so to do my job well, time and time again, I'll say this, it's that I've really got to provide various points of view. So that means that what we're going to do now is look at the traditional values at the time Rosemary Dobson wrote Over the Hill so that we can see what ideas were at play at the time and what ideas people believed in. So when Rosemary Dobson wrote Over the Hill in 1965, Australia was experiencing significant social and cultural changes. But many traditional values were still prevalent. Things like the traditional gender roles were still largely in place, with men expected to be breadwinners and women primarily responsible for domestic duties. However, women were increasingly entering the workforce and challenging these norms. Further, the poem's focus on a labourer returning home reflects the strong work ethic that was highly valued in Australian society. Hard work, especially manual labour, was seen as a virtuous and character-building style of work. Additionally, while Australia was becoming increasingly urbanised, as we spoke about earlier, where there was this problem with needing agriculture and not letting that all completely disappear, there was still a strong cultural attachment to rural life and values. So the poem's rural setting speaks to this ongoing connection to the land. Moreover, despite increasing immigration from non-British sources, Anglo-Celtic cultural norms still dominated Australian society. However, this was beginning to change as the post-war migration diversified the population. Hence, it's important to note that many traditional social and moral values persisted, including conservative attitudes towards marriage, family, and sexuality. However, the 1960s saw the beginning of challenges to these norms. In the 60s, the Australian ideal of egalitarianism, the belief in equality and the rejection of social hierarchies, was strong, and this is reflected in the poem's dignified portrayal of a working class figure. Finally, the quiet strength and resilience of the workman in the poem reflects the traditional Australian value of stoicism. In other words, Australian society valued individuals who faced hardships without complaining. Now, while these traditional values were still influential when Dobson wrote Over the Hill, it's important to note that the 1960s was a period of significant social change. So, the main idea of the poem is to capture a moment of transition between traditional Australia and the more diverse, socially progressive society that was emerging on the other side of the hill. Themes and concepts explored. Okay, so we've already spoken about a bunch of themes throughout today's episode, but let me get you up to speed and round up all of that information in one spot for you. Here we go. So Dobson looks at human resilience. We spoke about how the workman's ability to crest the hill, for example, symbolizes overcoming obstacles and persevering through life's difficulties. Dobson also invites readers to appreciate the strength and character of working class individuals by presenting the labourer with a sense of quiet dignity to highlight the value and importance of manual work and labour. Similarly, the poem suggests the workman's latent power. He could move mountains if he cared, is a quote that she uses, while also showing his humility and practicality in not exercising his power unnecessarily through the final stanza that implies a sense of acceptance and contentment with one's lot in life. So the workman chooses not to move mountains, suggesting an understanding of his place in the world. So note down the ideas of strength of the working class, humility, and acceptance and contentment with one's fruits in life. Next, the workman's interactions with the natural world is a central theme, especially when Dobson describes him as tossing the roan earth out like a chaff, and his cap as scooping cups of wind, to outline his close relationship with the environment. In the poem Over the Hill, the setting sun and the draining day symbolize the passage of time, both in the immediate sense of the workday ending and in the broader context of life's journey. So here we have another theme of passing time that you guys can explore in your essays and analyses. And finally, a big one here is nature, because as we mentioned at the very beginning of today's episode, the hill serves as both a literal and metaphorical obstacle, representing the challenges of daily life and the broader journey of human existence. Purpose of the author. So why did Rosemary Dobson write this poem? She could have written it to explore the human experience of enduring life challenges, using the image of a workman's journey home as a metaphor, or perhaps to examine the dignity and resilience of ordinary individuals, particularly those in the working class. Dobson may have wanted to reflect on the relationship between humans and the natural world, or to contemplate themes of human potential, humility, and contentment. Maybe she aimed to portray a moment of transition between work and rest, which can be seen as symbolic of larger life transitions. Either way, her poem certainly invites us as her audience and readers to consider the quiet strength and perseverance of everyday people, and the balance between human power and humility, even the connection between individuals and their environment, and how the passage of time affects the human experience. Before we get into the most important points from this one of Dobson's texts, I'm going to give your mind the chance to relax while sharing with you a word from our amazing sponsors for our podcasts. Sponsors help us reach our goal of keeping education free for you all to access on the go, meaning you guys can all continue listening here without subscriptions, which is my utmost priority with the Marathon HSC podcast. Now, if you haven't already heard of Notion, it's the perfect tool to help you build your organization skills from the ground up. It's got an integrated calendar to keep all your crazy busy schedules in one place, and multiple tabs and areas where you can keep all your assignments organized so you can tick them off and keep track of them, which is how I personally like to use Notion. Plus, there are hundreds of videos out there teaching you how to set yourself up for success on Notion. If this sounds like as much of a catch to you as it does to myself, click on the link in the show notes, which you can find in the description box of this episode, and sign up for some blazing productivity benefits. Alright, let's hear it for the key insights and thesis statements. Grab a pen, your phone, something to take notes with if you haven't been doing so already, and listen carefully, because this is an important part that I want you to take note of. What we're about to cover can be used as your thesis statements to help shape the paragraphs of your essays. Okay, ready? Let's make some thesis statements. So the first one I've got for you is, Over the Hill uses the journey of a labourer to explore the universal human experience of resilience in the face of daily challenges. Another one you could use is, Dobson's poem celebrates the quiet dignity of working class individuals, inviting readers to reconsider the value of manual labour in society. Or, through vivid imagery and symbolism, Over the Hill examines the complex relationship between humans and the natural world. Number 4 is, the poem juxtaposes human potential with humility, suggesting that true strength lies in understanding one's place within the larger universe. Number 5, Over the Hill serves as a metaphor for life's journey, with the hill representing the obstacles we must overcome to find contentment. Last 3, Dobson's portrayal of the labourer reflects changing perspectives on traditional Australian values in the mid-20th century. We also have, the poem's use of landscape and natural imagery underscores themes of endurance and the cyclical nature of human existence. And last of all, Over the Hill challenges readers to find meaning and beauty in ordinary experiences and everyday individuals. Finally, how does Rosemary Dobson's text maintain textual integrity? How does she do it? Why is it that we read her text today? Well, Dobson explores enduring human experiences and emotions that transcend time, such as resilience, dignity of labour, and the relationship between humans and nature. Her portrayal of the workman in Over the Hill is complex and multi-layered, avoiding stereotypes and presenting a dignified, relatable figure. Dobson's use of rich, evocative imagery creates a strong sensory experience for readers, making the poem's scenes and emotions come alive. The poem explores symbols like the hill and the journey home that can be interpreted on multiple levels, allowing for ongoing analysis and discussion. And while rooted in the mid-20th century Australia, the poem's themes and concerns remain pertinent to contemporary discussions about work, identity, and human connection to the environment. Dobson's skillful use of poetic techniques such as metaphor, personification, and rhythm demonstrates a high level of artistry that continues to be appreciated. Despite its depth, the poem remains accessible to a wide range of readers, using clear language and relatable scenarios. The poem's ambiguities and layers of meaning invite multiple interpretations, encouraging ongoing engagement and discussion. As a snapshot of mid-20th century Australian life and values, the poem holds historical significance, while still speaking to contemporary audiences. Dobson's nuanced examination of the human experience, including themes of resilience, dignity, and connection to nature, continues to resonate with readers across generations. For more in-depth analysis and annotations of the text, as well as Band 6 responses to Rosemary Dobson's poems, literary critiques of the techniques she uses, today's episode's transcript article, and more, head to the Marathon HSC website linked in the show notes caption and in our link tree on our Instagram bio. And that's it from me for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, we're on all social media platforms at Marathon HSC, so give us a follow to see some of our podcast highlights and to see explanations to short answer questions about HSC, and everything under that umbrella. If you liked what you heard in today's episode, do consider clicking that follow button so you can be notified of our upcoming episodes. Remember, Marathon HSC is here to save you in all your subjects, and with the common module texts underway, we'll be moving on to some other subjects too. Feel free to also add a comment or rate our podcast while you're at it. That would mean so much to us. Last of all, check out Notion for those blazing productivity benefits I mentioned earlier, and be sure to let me know if you have any questions about what we've covered today in the Q&A box attached to this podcast episode, and I would be happy to discuss them. This is Sarah from the Marathon HSC podcast, and I will see you all back here in our next episode, where we look at Rosemary Dobson's third prescribed poem, Summer's End. Catch you then.